Hey, everybody. This is Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. And with me is my recurring guest, excuse me, I misspoke there, guest Jeff Nyquist. He is a geopolitical expert. He is a prolific author. He's a scholar. He's a gentleman. He's Renaissance man, everything under the sun. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of current events topics, but the majority of our discussion is going to be today about his latest book over here, The Lies We Believe In. And I'm just going to hold it up, make sure that the camera can see it. It is available for purchase from his website. It's also from Amazon.com. I highly recommend this book. A lot of very interesting information and analysis, particularly his views on geopolitics and the threat of the domestic communist movement. He also has his points of view on political philosophy, where he quotes some of his favorite political philosophers and scholars. Welcome to the program, Jeff. How are you doing today?
Oh, I may be sweating a little bit because it's been hot and I just been running around, so getting things done. So it's a Sunday evening. Right now it's a little bit after 8 p.m., but the sun is still out. It's still summertime.
Oh, thank God for that. We gotta love daylight savings time, especially us outdoors people, those of us who enjoy the outdoors, which I know I do, and I think you do too. You enjoy it, at least in California. You used to do, didn't you do some hiking and
Well,
walking
I
and
liked
exercise?
hiking and water skiing and things like that, but I'm too old now. I'm a old person.
Well, you look very good for your age. I know you live a healthy lifestyle, so there's further proof. So hopefully God
Yeah,
will give you.
eat right and exercise, and then you'll get cancer at a young age. Remember, saliva causes cancer, but only in small amounts over a long period of time. So,
Well, I guess both of us are living proof that proper diet and exercise goes a long way and gives you intellectual clarity too, doesn't it?
well, let's hope. There's a lot of people, it takes more than just a good diet to have intellectual clarity,
Well, it
unfortunately.
helps. The right diet of reading material, at least, and the right diet of values. So tell us, speaking about reading material, Jeff, you came out with a new book, The Lies We Believe In. Could you tell us a little bit about it? Why did you write yet another book? Why? What's going on here?
Well, you don't run out of things to say, so you write more. There's just so much to say that, look, if everybody was saying this, if anybody was saying this, I would probably be writing something different, probably be writing fiction, but people aren't saying these things, and it's like people know there's something wrong, and they go to all these conspiracy theories and they go to all these other things, but they don't try to think it through. And it really, I mean, on a personal level, it boils down to somebody like the character of Socrates. There was a fellow who lived very simply. He didn't want expensive things. He didn't pursue money. He just wanted to find the truth. He wanted to know what people thought, and he wanted to find out who was wise and who wasn't, and figure some things out. And of course, they made him drink hemlock for his trouble when he was 70 years old. I think it was his Xenophon, his friend, their Athenian general, thought it was his retirement plan. He thought, gee, I don't want to be a burden to my friends. Maybe when they put me on trial for corrupting the youth and denying the gods, I'll just throw it in their face that I'm the exact opposite and that you guys owe me money for everything I've done, and then they'll put me to death and I won't be a burden to my friends. That sounds like a good retirement plan for me too. Um, it's in a way people honor you when they want to kill you. They want you to shut up. The lies we believe in, it's like lies pay because the truth is very hard for people to accept. The truth is painful. The truth about me, the truth about you, the truth about the world is like, oh, we're human. It's kind of, there's some bad things there. We want to prettify everything. And in the midst of that, people who are after power come in and they go, oh. They're not all honest. We can make something out of this. We can use the fact they're not all honest to own them all, and then we can have a totalitarian say we can be like gods. And see,
Well,
that's
it's
what gets you.
funny you mentioned that. It's, well, not funny. There's a recent case in the news uh, of a gentleman, I've mentioned him before, along with other tanky Marxist Leninist extremists, Caleb Maupin, who worked for Russia Today and Iranian Press TV. He used to be with the Workers' World Party. He created an organization called the Center for Political Innovation. It's been allied with the Schiller Institute, which is a LaRouche project.
Oh, yeah, the Schiller Institute. How about that? A Marxist who works for RT going for the Schiller Institute. Isn't that a lovely juxtaposition that explains everything?
Well, his former members, loyal members that came out of the CPI, issued a statement within 24 hours denouncing Maupin as basically a highly authoritarian cult-like leader that sexually and financially exploited his membership to the point where had to be so devoted they were eating food out of garbage bins. And he promised that he would help them. And these are people that co-signed on loans for parents' loans to get cars. And when I was looking through your book again, that statement of Jack Reed, of John Reed, buried in the Kremlin wall, came to mind. And in a way, it's saddening when you read this.
Yeah.
But it confirms a lot of things, doesn't it, Jeff, about the many, I would argue, many of the leaders in Marxist, Leninist, or other totalitarian parties. What's the problem with these individuals? Are you surprised by Mr. Maupin's behavior, or does this fit a pattern?
Oh, it fits a pattern. And, you talk about John Reed. John Reed was an American communist from Oregon who is buried in the Kremlin wall, as you say. He was involved in the Russian Revolution. He wrote, what was it, 10 Days That Shook the World?
Something
Was it
like that.
10
I
days
think it
that,
was
yeah.
10 Days That Shook the World. That's his.
Yeah, and of course he died. They made the movie Reds about him, and it's a very tragic story. Of course, Benjamin Gitlow published Reed's wife's letter, which is heartbreaking. That basically Reed realized the Bolsheviks, the communists that he had believed in, were a bunch of criminals of low character who would prostitute girls and rob people and swindle people, and that they had no morality. And he realized he had joined on the side of evil. And he didn't forgive himself. He had kidney disease, I believe, is what he had. And he just lost the will to live. And it's almost, his wife's letter implies that he willed himself to die because he says, I don't forgive myself. I don't forgive myself for siding with these evil people, for participating in this evil that is communism. It's and so what is it? What is it about their character that makes them this way? It's because it is, they're not just revolting, they're revolutionaries, right? they're they are there is something about being against tradition and the family and the structures of society that protect us, being destructively against those things, wanting power out of a revolution, wanting to use this talk of revolution for self-aggrandizement. I think it was Benjamin Gitlow said that there are two kinds of communists. There's these very sweet people who believe that socialism is going to make a beautiful world of peace and prosperity for everybody. And then there's the people that lead the movement, and he describes them as all sharks swimming, ready to eat each other and anybody that gets in their way. Totally exploitive individuals. And it's because Karl Marx was basically a bad man. He was a malignant narcissist, or worse, maybe he's a psychopath. Some people think Lenin was a psychopath. Chairman Mao Zedong was a psychopath. You look at the Castro brothers, you look at Ho Chi Minh. Look, these people, Pol Pot, these are not normal people psychologically. And so what they are doing is that this is a platform, Marxism-Leninism is a platform to grab power and to hold power forever. and to basically have this godlike ability to destroy anybody that comes against you, and to have all the wealth in the country that you govern that you control. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. And when you dig deeper, these individuals are malignant narcissists. In the case of Maupin, it was revealed that, and I kind of, a part of me empathizes in the sense you feel bad that he had an abusive childhood. Now, there are people that break out of that for various reasons, because of God, because of other role models, and a million and one different things, but others don't. And I think there's some deeper psychological reasons as well why these people become serial manipulators. It seems like this is a pattern with these leaders at top, even in the American context. This was just screaming Lyndon LaRouche and Jim Jones, to the point where he said he wanted to flee to and build a compound when he gets enough money, quits his job working for RT, and leaves his wife, who's a nanny. Incidentally, it was a professional nanny. And it's very heartbreaking to read this, because this, from our standpoint on this show, as a first world country, we have severe problems. The problem is that when you turn over, because remember, Russia in 1917 was in a country in chaos under the provisional government of Kerensky and company. And there was only 200,000 Bolsheviks and 91 million people, but somehow or another they took power. And people think that I'm crazy to say that this country could potentially collapse. And God forbid if it does, these people could potentially come to power. These are smart organizers. Yeah. These are not dumb people. They're very well read. I watch their shows, so I learn about them, and I've read their writings in the defector literature. And my warning to people, to populists, is don't get seduced by those people. Pick a different path. You don't want, if this country burns down its entirety, what will this country look like based on your experience with the left? And then we'll talk more about your book. I mean, what will happen knowing these personalities on the left that you've been exposed to, I believe, in undergraduate and graduate school? Would it be a pretty reformed state or no?
We're looking at it now. It's already started to happen. Come on, look at the price of gas. Look at the price of diesel. Look at the fact that we haven't built a nuclear weapon in over 30 years. Look at the fact that they want to take away one bit by bit the different parts of the nuclear triad that defends the country from Russian and Chinese nuclear weapons. And then imagine what happens if they get their utopia. Russia and China will turn the world into a giant massacre. People won't eat. There'll be mass starvation. There'll be plague, famine and plague, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, basically. And you don't know. Maybe they'll end up nailing the whole world down and creating a global totalitarian state like they dream of, or it just all goes to such chaos that we're in the middle of a new dark age, and 7 billion people are dead at the end of the decade. Something like that. I mean, look, my book, The Origins of the Fourth World War, the first book I read was I wanted to ask this question. I wanted to try to get to the bottom of this question. And so my new book, The Lies We Believe In, is sort of that's the yellow brick road of how we get there. You got to believe in all these lies to get to the Fourth World War, to get to the last war, the final destruction. And of course, what is the Fourth World War? The Third World War destroys everything, and the Fourth World War is the war that kind of determines, what the next thing is after that, because they're going to disorganize the entire world by doing what they're doing, and whatever happens in the end, these bunch of criminals running everything it's going to run out of gas. Because what they do, all they can do is destroy. They cannot build or create anything. And once they destroy the nexus of the world market, they go down the drain, right? Cannibalism is a great economy until it comes your turn to be eaten.
Correct. And we saw what happened with Mr. Maupin's organization. It cannibalized itself. And, you know, the sources of information over the decades that you've been exposed to, I mean, it's not like you're pulling all of these opinions and making it up out of thin air. You've actually had friendships and partnerships and collaboration with various defectors who served in the intelligence services and the military and the governments in Russia, in Venezuela, and China, to name a few countries. So you know intimately from the lips of insiders as to what goes on in these governments. And you describe some of that in your book, particularly one such defector that really, I would say, had a profound impact in your thinking and analysis, or at least confirmed it. And that was Colonel Stanislav Lunev. Could you tell the audience about who he was, because he's no longer alive, I believe, and some of the more disturbing things, at least disturbing to you, that he revealed to you based on his knowledge? Please.
Yeah, well, of course, he described the leaders. I remember I asked him, well, are there any good people in the Russian general staff or the Kremlin? And he kind of looked at me like I'd asked a really stupid question. And he said, these are not human beings. These are crazy persons, is what he said to me. And then he started talking about how Lenin was a psychopath, that when he was first in the army, before he got this high score on an intelligence test in the Soviet army, and they made him learn Chinese and become GRU, he wanted to be an army lawyer. And so he had a pass he had an special privileges in the archival library in Moscow where Lenin's papers are kept. And I guess he saw Lenin's papers, and he told me that he lost his faith in communism reading Lenin's notes. Do a provocation on this village, go in, kill them all, slaughter the women and children, and with the F word, with all kinds of profanities. It just totally bloodthirsty, crazy stuff. And he said it was absolutely, the guy was a psychopath. And he had the insight. He suddenly understood the system for the first time. He understood why it worked the way it did, why his bosses, why he was never going to make it to the rank of general, why colonel was as high as he was going to go, because, to reach the highest levels, you have to share that mentality. And if people want to understand what's happening in Ukraine right now, with them knocking over cities and attacking apartment complexes and schools and hospitals, why it's so brutal, why, some sources think, 100 to 200,000 Ukrainians, mostly civilians, have been killed in these bombardments. It's because these are ordered. I saw the testimony of a Russian soldier the other day who was part of the 64th Motorized Rifle Division. And he was saying that their officers ordered them to rob, to loot, and to murder civilians. And he admitted he had murdered a civilian in a village, and he named the village and the person he murdered. This guy had so much guilt. And he said, they ordered us to murder. Okay, why? Well, they're psychopaths, and they seek out victims. That's what psychopaths do. They're hungry for victims, just like a serial killer. It's sort of like that. And there's different kinds of psychopaths. Some are dangerous physically, some aren't. These psychopaths in the Soviet Union, the ones that, and now the Russian Federation, very, very dangerous. We have so many murders in Stalin's Russia and then afterwards that we can't even hardly count them. It's controversial how many people communism killed in the 20th century. They think one scholar thinks it's well over 100 million people. I mean, that's twice as many as died in World War II, killed by communism. And it's, Pol Pot, and it's the Ho Chi Minh, and it's the Kim family in communist North Korea, and it's Mao Zedong in China, and it's all of the communists in Latin America, and the FARC in Colombia, and the Castro brothers in Cuba, and the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, and then the millions that have died in Africa, in Congo, and in the war there that took up a lot of the previous decade, 2 decades ago. That began after Laurent Kabila took over the Congo, a communist, a friend of Che Guevara. So you have to understand, and all of this has been happening right under our nose. Communism is dead. No, it's not. They're still killing. They've been killing millions all along. It just doesn't show up on our radar. Nepal, you know, and then Russia, the murders in Russia, and now in Ukraine. And I think Ukraine belongs in that category, because why? You have Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy head of the Russian Security Council, former president of Russia, friend of Putin, making a post on social media saying we're going to bring back the Soviet Union. We're going to have the glorious borders of the Soviet Union restored, right? And then basically saying that Kazakhstan is committing genocide against ethnic Russians, so we have to invade it. We have to put the union back. I mean, and then deleting the post, and then saying, "Oh, somebody hijacked my social media account." No, you're the deputy head of the Russian Security Council. You have security on your social media account. Nobody hijacked it.
Of course not. Yeah.
Of course not. It's ludicrous. But then you have this little video of Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, saying we're going to put back the Soviet Union and we're going to have peace.
And they supposedly denied saying that too, even having Newsweek publishing a denial that he said that, and he's claiming that he said that back in like 1992. It's just, yeah.
Well,
yes. Yes.
Well, I guess he still looks the same, right? He hasn't changed in 20 years.
Of course not.
30 years, sorry. I mean, it's just, it's so obvious what they're all about. So, yeah, a psychopath. So Lunev really taught me that, and also about China, because he was a sinologist. He spoke fluent Mandarin. He studied the Far East. He knew China very well. He worked in China. And the things that he had to say about that there was a secret alliance going back into the 80s and maybe a long time before between Russia and China, that he had seen evidence of it, and that they had signed at the end of the Cold War a whole bunch of agreements to share all intelligence on the United States and to divide up the United States in a future war of aggression against America, divide up America and Canada between them, where Russia would get Alaskan parts of Canada and China would get the rest.
And this war plans were done after the, quote, collapse of the Soviet Union. This was done under our friend buddy Yeltsin.
It was finalized. He said after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a meeting of the Russian General Staff, and they said the nuclear war plan against America is still on. Only we're providing the missile power, China is providing the manpower. And they basically said that this was going to be sometime in the far future, that it was a long-term plan. They had evidently gotten together before the end of the Cold War to start talking about it. And it was really where they're headed. And you can see it matches what Golitsyn had warned about in '84. It means that they're still on track. And now we see this unfolding. A possible war in Taiwan, a possible war in Ukraine, and now we have the Vostok exercises, where Chinese and Russian troops next month are going to be drilling in the Russian Far East for war, practicing war against who? Well, what's adjoining the Russian Far East? Alaska.
Who else? Alaska. Who else? They're not doing it as a jobs program, that's for sure.
No. So, I'm always worried. I'm very concerned because I don't think people take these threats seriously. I mean, are they going to attack and nuke us tomorrow? No, I've never said that, but eventually that's basically their long-term thinking, and it's been long-term for a long time. So we could be getting close. You've got the Chinese people, you're getting this. It isn't just Mr. Wang of Looting Media. For the last 2 years, we've been receiving information from in China saying China's getting ready for war, China's getting ready for war, China's getting ready for a nuclear war, China's getting ready for war, Russia's getting ready for war, Russia's attacking, Russia's at war now. And then all these nuclear war threats accelerating from Russia since the February 24 attack on Ukraine. Now you've got the story that they've planted charges in the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, that they are replacing. Look, they told the Ukrainian staff to go home. What are they manning it with Russians? What are they going to do? They're blaming the Ukrainians. They're saying the Ukrainians are shelling near the plant. What are they going to do? Claim the Ukrainians hit the plant and use that as an excuse for nuclear war? That's a rumor, by the way, coming out of Moscow, that they're going to use that as the excuse to go to nukes. Tactical nukes? Are they going to go strategic and hit America? It's really hard to read because they are so good at playing, they're holding their cards, not letting anybody see their cards. And so the same thing with the Chinese. And you know the Chinese and Russians are on the same page. Look at what the Chinese are doing in Taiwan. They are moving right up to the edge of war. It's a blockade, but it's not, right, because they're not shooting at anything. But they got these aggressive patrols, and now they've brought in these fishing vessels with thousands of Chinese nationals who are really Chinese people's militia that could just land in Taiwan. And there's rumors of a coup plot against the government of Taiwan. And the Chinese are just tightening the pressure on Taiwan, tightening, as if, but of course, you see, I've always said they're not interested in Taiwan. Taiwan's going to fall when they wipe out America. And then you have these rumors again and again about a nuclear Pearl Harbor attack on the U.S. Navy, on the U.S. nuclear forces by China and Russia, from Mr. Wing of Luda Media saying, well, yeah, they're working out the code words like East Wind Rain for telling the different, I forget what it was, 30 something different elements of their military that would be involved in such an attack, including units of the Chinese strategic rocket forces, which carry their nuclear weapons. So look, this is very serious, but what is the Biden administration doing? Just think of Biden nodding off at a meeting. That's what they're doing. You know, and as far as communism goes, look, there's lots of communists in the Biden administration. They call themselves liberals or Democrats, but you look at their background, you look at who they are and what they've done. Look at our friend Trevor Loudon knows about all this. He's written about this. You know.
Now I wanted to step backwards because it was very interesting about Colonel Lunev's observations when he was stationed in China with the Soviet embassy, I believe, there, if I recall correctly. And he noticed that there was an alliance, and you wrote about it briefly. I believe it was in one of your WorldNet Daily articles years and years ago. What specifically did he notice that tipped him off that there could be an alliance? Were there meetings between the military attaches, which actually have been publicized by Xinhua, open meetings? Was there weapons transfers? Were there intelligence cooperation? I talk about some of that in my book.
Yes.
But forget my book.
Yeah.
What did he tell you? Because this is what the audience is interested in.
This is something that I was also told by another, a former KGB guy, Lunev was GRU, is that he had the very strong sense through various incidents that his bosses were directly in communication with the Chinese intelligence bosses. That everything that he did and knew, both sides knew.
What kind of communication? Intelligence, military cooperation?
Intelligence.
Intelligence.
Just things that he was doing that, look, they were, you know, you talk to Konstantin Preobrazhensky, for example, he worked in Japan and Mongolia, spying on China supposedly. He said to me, he said, look, when I would turn a Chinese national to spying, he would be immediately feeding me false information. And I knew, and basically he thought, you know, it was pretty much known by his bosses that there was some, you know, he couldn't say for sure, but there's something, it's almost as if there was a feedback loop and it was almost like a game. He said they can't penetrate each other. So you got to ask yourself, why can't they penetrate each other? If your intelligence service and my intelligence service are aligned at the top, we can't penetrate each other because we are each other. See? So you have this kind of treaty of transparency between these intelligence services so they can have a degree of trust. And so it's a big question. This is an opaque area that we just don't understand. But the one thing that Lunev told me that was really stunning was that I had asked him about the conspiracy and death of Lin Biao. Lin Biao was the #2 man in Mao's China in 1971. He was the head of the People's Liberation Army, right? The Chinese military. And Lin Biao was part of the Cultural Revolution. Him and Madame Mao and Mao were the leaders of the Cultural Revolution. And supposedly, Lin Biao had conspired against Mao in collusion with the Russian general staff to create a phony war between Russia and China where whole regiments destroyed each other to force Mao into his bunker where Lin Biao would gas him, right?
Hmm.
So General Lin would gas Mao in the bunker, and then the China would be brought back into the fold of the Soviet Union. Well, supposedly the plot was uncovered. Lin Biao and his associates fled in a jet towards the Soviet Union and were shot down over Mongolia just as they crossed into Mongolia by either a jet aircraft or a surface-to-air missile and crashed in Mongolia and died. Well, I asked Lunev, do you know anything about this conspiracy and death of Lin Biao? Because there's some really interesting details on this that suggest that it wasn't as advertised. And Lunev said, yeah, I had a friend who was at the crash site in Mongolia of Lin Biao's plane. Okay, wow, that's pretty big. Well, what's the news? Well, everybody on the plane had been murdered before they were put on the plane. The pilot had flown it over the Mongolian border, crashed it, parachuted it out, and was picked up on the border.
Surely, did he reveal this when he was debriefed by the CIA?
It depends on whether they asked him about it or not. See, I asked him because I figured a GRU colonel with that kind of level with that kind of rank in China might know some interesting things.
And
And
he
he
did.
did. He did. And so
Terrifying things.
my question to him then was, okay, remember, this was just weeks, basically a couple months before Kissinger goes to Beijing, right? The secret trip to arrange the opening to China for Nixon to go. Summer of 1971. So wait a minute. This was an event that supposedly put Mao in the frame of mind of being the friend of Richard Nixon, right? From being a dedicated communist to rubbing shoulders with Dick Nixon. But wait a minute. The Soviet Union was being accused of trying to overthrow Mao. And here they had the crash site where all the conspirators had been murdered on the Chinese side of the border and flown there. Lin Biao didn't try to escape to the Soviet Union, which, by the way, that's the Lin Biao's flight to the Soviet Union was the proof that the Soviet Union was behind the plot, right? Well, if the Soviet Union had the proof that Lin Biao had not tried to escape to the Soviet Union, why didn't they publicize it to the world that the story was a fabrication and for the communist world to know that Russia was innocent of plotting against Mao, that there was a frame-up job. They hadn't plotted against Mao. Why didn't the Soviet Union publicize that? Whenever there's good propaganda material to put them in a good light, they always publicize it. Why did they remain silent, which was taken as an admission of guilt, and go along with the Chinese deception regarding the Lin Biao's flight, unless they were part of the deception? And I put that question to Colonel Lunev, and he looked at me and he said, I never thought about it before. And it got us into a very interesting series of discussions about Golitsyn, about the collapse of the Soviet Union, which led Lunev to say collapse of the Soviet Union had to be a plan. It had to be a strategy.
What did I'm assuming he heard of Golitsyn before because
Yeah, he had, but he didn't read it. And he said, you know what? I think, after we had about a 4-hour discussion, he said, I'm going to read that book. And he did. And I had a discussion with him later after he read the book. And he said, okay, I read the book. I agree with everything in the book, except they cannot bring communism back. And of course, Golitsyn had written the book in the 80s before they realized how hated the Soviet system was. When they went to get rid of the Soviet system in the Soviet Union, what they discovered was that many of the so-called communists didn't believe in it. And that is what has created such a problem for them and why they've had problems in these former communist countries becoming the most the strongest enemies of Moscow. Poland, for example, Ukraine, in war, at a war with Russia. Russia trying to conquer it now. This is, you talk about something that backfired. The strategy of weakening communism in order to better penetrate the West and to get the credits and the money they needed to rebuild and to get modern technology. This is something that had profound moral and political effects on the Soviet Empire. They could not put that Humpty Dumpty back together again. They're trying, and they're struggling mightily, and it's a very serious problem for them.
Now, a little brief foray into current news, and I really would like your opinion. I think our listeners on the Populist Patriot, a number of whom listen to your analysis on this show and tune into the program. Alexander Dugin's daughter, Daria, was killed in a car bomb attack. What is your analysis of that? Is it a provocation? What's going on here? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no telling. This is a tragic event. This is a young person that's been killed. It's generally expected that it's said that he was supposed to be in that car with her. And it's believed to have been an assassination attempt against him. Of course, the Kremlin is acting as if this is the Ukrainians that were behind this. And of course, nobody can say absolutely because we don't have any evidence. We don't know. But there's always the cui bono question. Why would the Ukrainians blow up a person with their daughter, with an innocent person, in Moscow, when it would really backfire in terms of Russian public opinion? Because I think what the Ukrainians in their war against Russia need to do is they need to try to win Russian public opinion, and they've actually tried to do things to win that public opinion over. And the atrocities, as I mentioned later, that the Russian army is ordered to do is an attempt by Russia to drive a wedge between the Russians and Ukrainians, to embitter the Ukrainians against the Russians, so they can't make this appeal to the Russians. And of course, so who really has to benefit? If the Russian people become more angry at Ukraine and blame Ukraine for the killing of an innocent girl, young woman, this is just feeds the fires of anti-Ukrainian hate in Russia, and it becomes a propaganda occasion. So it doesn't in any way help Ukraine to have done such a horrible act. And the other thing, Dugin is not that important of a person in terms of this war. He's a very talented intellectual propagandist. I would call him. He calls himself a philosopher. He has compromised himself with the regime, so I don't take his philosophical statements seriously. But that's not the kind of person that is going to decide the war. And I think that on its face, I would be looking to the Russian side for this. And maybe the daughter actually was the target to create sympathy for Mr. Dugin, to give him more publicity, to put him, they wouldn't, if the Russian special services did this, and it's just speculation, Dugin, of course, would be heartbroken. You would have a grieving father on Russian television, and a very intelligent man who could make a powerful case to the Russian people to extend the war. And this troubles me when all this fuss has been made over the Zaporozhye power plant. If they make this young lady into a martyr in the right, you just watch the Russian press and see, is this going to be a signal to make the war more brutal? Because there is some kind of evidence that Russia is planning some kind of escalation of the war, whether it's to throw their whole air force into it, to use tactical nukes, or the talk about bringing North Korean soldiers from the Far East. We don't know. They've raised, a guess is 100,000 additional troops they might be able to throw in. We just don't know. But they've got something going on.
My concern is they could use the death of Daria as an excuse to, let's just say, unleash more brutality in this war, even weapons of mass destruction, because we've seen gangster governments like that in National Socialist Germany. They will use extensive provocations to start a war by claiming the other side as aggressors. You look at what happened in Nicaragua, particularly with the FDN faction of the anti-Sandinista guerrilla forces. The Sandinistas, this was revealed by a defector by the name of Alvaro Baldizon, and he worked as Tomas Borga's right-hand man. He was the Ministry of Interior.
Yeah.
And this was pretty sick. What they did was, these were forces, special operation forces of the Ministry of the Interior in Nicaragua. They would dress as FDN fighters. They were trained in East Germany, ironically, given my little history lesson on World War II, the start of the invasion of Poland. And they were sent back in 1981, and they were dressed as FDN fighters. And what did they do? They used that to penetrate and destroy, or try to destroy, the FDN, but it also turned global public opinion against the FDN because they committed atrocities against other Sandinistas that you used to read, if you remember back when you were younger. I remember a little bit when I was younger at the end of the late 80s reading this in the Western left publications and groups like Witness for Peace. Oh my God, the FDN, the so-called Contras, were cutting people alive and everything else. And the vast majority of those atrocities were committed by Sandinistas against other Sandinistas to destroy to destroy any positive, to destroy the FDN's image internationally. So they have played these very elaborate, very just breathtakingly brutal, almost unthinkable, committed these measures. And I don't like talking out of turn without evidence, but there is a pattern of this behavior, and it can't be totally dismissed either. I mean,
you've got the famous, assassination of Kirov in Russia. The Kirov murder, which Kirov was one of the top Bolshevik officials, and he's assassinated by somebody, a lower level Bolshevik, and Stalin gets in there, and it's sort of the beginning of a kind of larger purge, and you're going, all these people end up getting blamed. There's a wider plot, right? So it's an excuse to go after other people. And it's largely thought that Stalin ordered Kirov's murder. I think that's Robert Conquest's supposition, even though it really still remains a mystery. But it is a modus operandi of totalitarian regimes. And of course, you have in a lot of these regimes, in Hitler's regime, when a Nazi official would be killed, like before Kristallnacht, they would make that into an occasion. It was German diplomat was assassinated by a Jewish guy in 1938, and this was an occasion of massive anti-Semitic rioting, like a huge pogrom, the night of broken glass, Kristallnacht, in German. So this is not an uncommon thing in those kind of settings.
So now you address in several chapters the response of the federal government. And I'll ask you this question. What was the Clinton and Bush administrations, because Lunev defected in 1992, so George Herbert Walker Bush was president. Mm-hmm. What was the reaction of these administrations, the two administrations, a Republican and Democratic administration? What was their responses to all of this information? Because, we were shoveling money and technology to the Russians like there was no tomorrow. So it didn't seem to do anything.
Well, this is Lunev's book, Through the Eyes of the Enemy. It came out about the same time as my book, Origins of the Fourth World War. And that's one of the reasons we met, was because our books came out around the same time. And journalists got us together because our books had some similarities in them. And Lunev, if you notice at the end of the book, Lunev mentions that he was accused of being a false defector. And this is Clinton was president at the time. Again, the lies we believe in. When you call into question the lies we believe in, Russia and China split is real, Soviet Union's collapse, there is no more communism, Russia and China are our partners. When you start calling this into question, in his book, Through the Eyes of the Enemy, he's saying Russia's still an enemy, a dangerous enemy of the United States. In 1998, when this book came out, you are basically questioning the lies that people believe in. You're saying, look, that may not be true. That may be a lie. And that puts you in the crosshairs of not just pushback, but serious consequences. You know, Lunev, when I was with him at different times, he feared assassination. They had vowed to kill him, the Russian Federation. And you know what they did to Alexander Litvinenko? You know what they did to the Skripals? You know, poisoning him with Novichok. You know, they kill people. Moscow goes after people and kills people who they consider traitors to their criminal system. So
it's deeply frightening. Before we go, before I'm going to give a quote actually, and just kind of watch your response. You probably read it in one of my books, but I want to read it for the sake of the audience because I think it's kind of a head turner. So I wanted you, before I read it and find it, I'd like you to elaborate on any other points or information you'd like to highlight in your book.
well, yeah, the book is about Russia, China, and the Communist Revolution in America. And those things are all connected because the communist movement is the new religion. They are trying to get power, and even if it's a minority, right, organization is the basis of government and control. It's not everybody, it's not democracy like people think. It's the matter of the most organized people, the most organized to carry out a strategy, to hold power, to use violence against other people or use other resources to get people to do what they want. So I want people to keep that in mind, and you know, I think people should read the book and draw their own conclusions.
Well, some in our audience probably think you're crazy. Cray-cray. That Mr. Jeff, the man with the beard, is cray-cray. Eager for a Cold War. I'm going to read you guys a quote. And it's in my latest book. I'm not trying to promote my book. I'm actually indirectly promoting Jeff's research and analysis. And this is a memorandum of conversation between Erich Honecker and Kim Il-sung. Erich Honecker was one of the former communist dictators of East Germany, and Kim Il-sung was the first president and dictator of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, known as North Korea. Dated May 31st, 1984, and this was accessed from the website wilsoncenter.org of the Cold War International History Project. And Kim Il-sung, in this meeting with Erich Honecker, said the following: "Given the complex world situation, I hope that the Soviet Union and China work things out. I believe that the development of relations with the US is not targeted against the Soviet Union." This is Kim Il-sung, who had an alliance with China and the Soviet Union. "I believe Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai already told me that when they establish relations with the US," let me repeat that again to the audience. This is very important. "I believe that the development of relations with the US is not targeted against the Soviet Union. Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, who held various positions within the PRC government, already told me that when they established relations with the US. They told us every time they met with Japan and the US, the only objective of these relations is to obtain developed technology and credit from Japan and the US." And everybody, they're saying, people say that Jeff Nyquist is crazy now. Jeff and I have some differences somewhat on politics, economics, the role of the state, whatever. But the fact of the matter is Jeff Nyquist is more right and wrong. This is from a mainstream document leaked out of the former GDR after German Democratic Republic, East Germany, after its collapse. I mean, is anybody out there like shocked and even care about this? That's like smoking gun almost. To say even if the split was real, it's been totally exaggerated at best.
Well,
And here
basically
it's
that,
saying contradictory that really it wasn't directed against the Soviet Union. It was to get money and technology.
right.
What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, of course.
Are
It
you,
was just to get money and technology. You've got quotes from Deng Xiaoping saying the same thing to party cadres in the People's Republic of China. This is not shocking at all. So when the more you know people from that world, whether it's in Moscow or Beijing or some of these outlying countries, including Southeast Asian countries, North Korea, the more you learn about what they know and what they're told, the more you realize we're just completely misled. These stupid Americans will believe anything. We'll just say that we're having a split. They'll believe it. They'll play the China card. They'll give us all the technology. They'll build up our industry. They'll do well, this is what we did. This is why we're in so much trouble. Look
well,
around.
didn't you, and this was on a radio show, so it is public, and obviously you don't have to mention names. You tried to warn people who were quote unquote conservative. We know about the extreme tanky left. We talked about Maupin. We talked about the Bolsheviks in Russia. Excuse the language, they're pieces of crap. They're horrible human beings, whatever the circumstances, whatever. These are evil gangsters. They're awful. They're terrible. We get that. But you try to talk to people tied to supposedly conservative, quote unquote, billionaires, and you recounted this publicly in an interview that's available on YouTube, quoted in my book. Could you tell us about that? I mean, you're mentioning all this information. I mean, eventually the billionaires, most of them will get probably killed in a class genocide. So why the hell are they investing in Russia and China? What went
Well,
with
look,
that
I
meeting?
was told that, the industrial and financial elite of America wants to trade with Russia and China. And they want to do it so badly because there's so much money in it, they think, that they're not going to listen to any talk about the collapse of the Soviet Union being part of a deception or China and Russia really being together. They're not going to entertain the idea. They're not going to ever understand it. They're incapable. So basically, I was told, well, we're going to get national missile defense and all will be well. Well, they never got national missile defense that meant anything, and all wasn't well. Our elite went into business with Russia and China, and they got corrupted. They basically got dirtied up. From banks, from the what was it, the Bank of New York scandal years ago, to the all of the problems with the Chinese system and all of the investments and corporations tangled up in China, including big pharma, by the way, and the way the Chinese nationals are in our labs and
Correct.
involved in making some of our vaccines.
I know, which is absolutely suicidal. Whatever your positions on the vaccines are, the fact of the matter you even mention a rather, forgive me if I'm butchering your quote in your book, it's like basically going to the person who wants to poison you and eat their food, basically.
Right, you're not
That's
going to
what,
eat the food. You're not going to go to somebody's house who wants to kill you and eat their food.
exactly. You mentioned this in your book. It's
Yeah,
a great
no,
analogy.
I mean, look, we've got to defend our country's food supply, our medicine, everything. We've got to defend it against possible as a vector of a toxic attack, or a biological attack. Biological warfare is not some fiction,
No.
and both Russia and China have been up on that. So we're just not. The meaning of what I've been saying all these years is we must defend. We must defend our country, and it requires a certain kind of thinking and a certain kind of vigilance and a certain kind of appreciation for your country to defend it. And it doesn't matter what your ideology it is. It doesn't matter, any of that. It just matters that we, as a people, we defend. We have a border. We have an army. We have a national intelligence, we have counterintelligence, and we make sure that we don't have traitors controlling key parts of our economy, government, science, industry, and so on, and trade policy.
Sure, sure. You have people who are ideological traitors, in my opinion, or treason of the heart, as I refer it. And some of them have penetrated both parties. The Democratic Party, you have people who are sort of corporate Democrats, like Dianne Feinstein, her and her husband are tied up the yin yang in the People's Republic of China since at least the late 70s, when what was she, the mayor of San Francisco, if I recall correctly, at one point. You had people who are like Judy Chu, who at least I think it still is a congresswoman from California. She has intimately tied with high-level Chinese Communist Party officials. You have the Republicans on the other hand. You have the labor-hating sort of globalist reactionary Mitch McConnell and him and his wife. I mean, Mitch McConnell said back in 1992 he couldn't find a communist even with a flashlight in Beijing when he visited there. So this is, and then you have tanky Marxist-Leninist groups like, I hate to beat up on him, but it is an obvious example, and there are many others that say that China and Russia are not our enemies. And CPI, the group, Maupin's group that I mentioned earlier, they do cooperate with other Marxist-Leninist extremist groups. And they got their start in organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America, which, you know, seeks to have continue to have tremendous influence in the Democratic Party to transform legitimate, in my opinion, legitimate progressive populist causes into the cause of socialism and Marxism-Leninism, which just represents another flip side of political and economic monopoly, doesn't it, Jeff?
Well, if they get a monopoly on importing Wuhan bat soup, don't drink it. Don't buy it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Don't buy the Wuhan bat soup. What can I say?
If you had to come up with a 5-point plan, I know I'm picking your mind. I love picking your mind, Jeff.
5 point.
All right, come on.
Does it have to be 5?
All right, okay. let's do the 10-year plan instead of the 5-year plan.
All right.
Which, I mean, what would you do immediately given our situation right now? Just, I know it's a hard topic, but a little bit of solutions. We can sit here kind of analyzing and picking apart the different problems. But what would you do based on your research? And you have a lot of networking with intelligence and military people. What would you do to control the internal communist extremists, as well as dealing with countries like Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran?
I would, if I were president, I would appoint Roger Robinson in charge of an Office of Strategic Warfare, Economic Warfare, and I would tell him to that I would want to know everything I would have to do as president to get China out of our capital markets, to get all the Chinese companies, owned companies, out of America. The Chinese nationals cannot own companies. I would go to eliminate dual citizenship. And I would, anybody who's a Chinese national who has Chinese citizenship can't hold American citizenship. And I would want to send as many Chinese nationals back to China as I could on some kind of program to get them out of the country, and to get them especially out of sensitive positions in the country, and especially science and anything related to sensitive economic areas. And I would want America to start making things again, not to be dependent on China for anything. And of course, to reopen our mining industry so we can produce the metals that we need, that we're not dependent on China or their allies in Africa or Russia. I don't believe in autarky, but I believe that ourselves and our allies should be able to operate without having this economic warfare, this supply chain destruction, and this restriction of our resources. I mean, look, we could ship natural gas. There's a process by which natural gas can be made colder, turned into a liquid, shipped to Europe, turned back into a gas, and given to people. That's what I would do. And then domestically, I would offer an amnesty. If you've been compromised by the Chinese, Russians, Cubans, whoever, if you've been compromised, you got 3 months. Turn yourself in, all things are forgiven. You won't be able to participate in politics again, but you will be forgiven. And we want a full confession. We want to know all the details. And maybe maybe a few people would confess, and a lot of people run to Havana or Beijing or Moscow to escape.
Oh,
They could
good
take the,
riddance to them.
yeah. So, we got to clean up the swamp. And you know what? The swamp is, it's very simple what the swamp is. The deep state are the communists, and the communists are the deep state. And the swamp is the penetration that they've done over the last 100 years since the Bolshevik Revolution. And there's no doubt when we see all the evidence. I mean, look, let the chips fall where they may. But that is the key. And amnesty, get to the bottom of it. And look, if people from the FBI and Justice Department flee, so be it. But we have to get people who have violated their oath of office in the federal government out of those federal jobs. You have tenure in your job? No, you don't. Not if you violated your oath to the Constitution, you don't. And I think there's been plenty of criminal behavior in the federal government that has to be looked at. So we need a house cleaning. We need to set up grand juries. We need to have investigative bodies looking into not just the honesty of government, but to the degree to which our government has been penetrated by foreign communist intelligence services and domestic revolutionary communist violent organizations. And that's basically what we need to do.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we have a catastrophe just waiting to happen. It's breathtakingly bad based on, I think, the research you have done for decades and the research I've done for a long time and many others that have done. I agree with many of your suggestions. I think we could probably elaborate more and speak all night about it. I think your first suggestion about Roger Robinson probably would be one of the first things I would do. And I would make him basically a permanent member of my staff once again. That's totally, I'm using a word that younger people use on YouTube. It's totally based. I give you a total like 10 fist bumps on that. Where can people find your book? I'm going to hold it up for you, for the audience.
It's
so
on Amazon, The Lies We Believe In, and you can put that word in, The Lies We Believe In, J.R. Nyquist or Jeff Nyquist on Amazon. You should be able to come. And my other book, The Fool and His Enemy, is available too, but this one has just come out and my publisher is very much pushing it, and I've even started a little advertisement campaign for The Fool and His Enemy. So I want more people to see this because I'm going through this. I've been going over this for years, and I've been pretty intensively writing over the last 3-4 years, really trying to, because we're really close to what they would be the final, the end stage of their final phase of their strategy, and it's a really dangerous time, and people have to know about this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's why we have you on the show. That's why many other YouTubers and independent media have you on, and will continue to have you on. And just let's say, just continue to privately say prayers for our country, and be thankful for the blessings that we may have, and just continue to spread the word. I think we should, locally network in your local political bodies, groups of friends and family, if they're receptive, educate them, talk to them about these issues, and also be prepared to as well. Prepare your families, with common sense preparations, extra food, if you firearms, or even one firearm. I mean, you got to protect yourselves. And any concluding remarks, or we all done? I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we have. It's people are pretty tired now, probably. So thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. We'll have you again, of course. It's not the first or the last time. Take care, everybody. God bless. Have a great and productive week.